Guten Tag, APUSH. We have a new video today. It's the bee's knees by the big cheese himself, Mr. Linenger. Let's make history today as we jaw over Unit 7, Day 1. But first, let's do our daily punishment. You really shouldn't be intimidated by advanced math. It's as easy as pie. Alright, kiddos, your key terms for today are NATO, the Warsaw Pact, the Nuremberg Trials, Operation Paperclip, the hydrogen bomb, Joseph McCarthy, Alger Hiss, the Loyalty Review Board, the Smith Act, the Korean War, the Yalta Conference, the United Nations, Harry Truman, MAD, the Truman Doctrine, the Marshall Plan, NSC 68, the Berlin Airlift, George F. Kennan, the Containment Theory, the National Security Act, HUAC, the McCarran Act, Alfred and Ethel Rosenberg, Old Dick Nixon, and the Hollywood 10. We're going to be talking about the beginning of the Cold War under Harry Truman's presidency today. We'll be going over life in the late 40s, predominantly as it relates to the Cold War, the causes of the Cold War, and the major foreign policy events during the Cold War. So let's get started. After World War II, there's going to be two alliance systems that are going to develop as the world's going to become more bipolar. In the Soviet Union, they'll have the Eastern Bloc. These nations will be led by Communist Russia. They're going to force the Eastern European countries to become communist in violation of the Yalta Agreement. They're going to join an alliance system called the Warsaw Pact. America is going to get the Western nations, the non-communist nations, to join an alliance system called NATO. The goal of the Eastern Bloc will be worldwide spread of communism. The goal of the Western nations will be to stop the spread of communism, the eventual collapse of the communist world. During this time, in the Cold War, we're going to have espionage between the Russian Secret Service, the KGB, and the American Secret Service, the CIA, assassination of foreign leaders. We'll have a nuclear arms race. We'll have ideological competition for the minds and hearts of third world people. Both U.S. and Russia will try to get third world nations to support either communist or non-communist governments. It's going to be fun. Here's a map of Europe of the Iron Curtain. The Iron Curtain right here, the division between the communist nations and the non-communist nations. Let's talk a little bit about background, about what led to this stuff. So after World War II, we did have the Nuremberg trials. This is where Nazi war criminals were tried for crimes against humanity, starting a war, genocide, making war on civilians. This is the first time there was an international trial, so it's going to be like a stepping stone for international law. There was some hypocrisy in it because some of the Nazis were tried for crimes that didn't even exist in international law yet. Also, the Russians were one of the judges, and they did war crimes also. But the people that were convicted were pretty bad people. They were bad times. One of the big things that leads to the Cold War is the Yalta Conference. In the Yalta Conference, Stalin did tell FDR that he would allow free elections in Eastern Europe. After World War II ended, however, Stalin's going to send in the Russian soldiers, the tanks, and they're going to force the Eastern European countries to become communist. When Harry Truman becomes president, he's going to really become dissatisfied, and he's going to lose faith in communist Russia. He's going to think communist Russia is just like the Nazis, and that they're trying to take over the world. After World War II, we will have the United Nations. It's going to be a more OP version of the League of Nations. It does have an army. It will be created. It has a General Security Council, which America is part of, and so is Russia. One of the things America is going to do also after World War II is America will rescue Nazi scientists and send them to the United States. This is called Operation Paperclip. Some of these scientists committed war crimes. Some of them experimented on Jews, but they were kind of geniuses. And America is going to basically tell them, we're not going to execute you. You're going to be moderately free, but we're going to be watching you for the rest of your life. However, you're not going to go to jail or be executed by the Russians, but you're going to work for us in our government now. So it's a very pragmatic, amoral thing to do. And some of these Nazi scientists will help form NASA because the Germans were brilliant with rocketry. Let's talk about Harry Truman. Harry Truman did not attend college. When he was young, he went bankrupt. He was determined to pay all the money back, which he did. He believed in honesty and integrity. He was the vice president for FDR in 1944. Pragmatic, kind of moderate Democrat. Wasn't well known before he became president. After he leaves the presidency, the presidential libraries and pensions will start to be given because he is one of the poorer presidents. All right. One of the big things that's going to happen in the Cold War is there's tension between America and Russia. America's mad at Russia for for forcing Eastern European countries to become communist. Russia is angry and upset at the United States for not getting involved in World War II quicker and taking until 1944 to invade France. America built a nuclear bomb in 1945. Part of that reason was to intimidate Russia. That's why part of the reason why we blew up Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Russia will build a nuclear bomb in 1949. Part of the reason is they had Russian spies in the American nuclear industry. America will build a hydrogen bomb in 1952, which is 1,000 times more powerful. Russia builds it 1 year later. Again, they had spies. This is going to lead to an arms race between America and Russia, building bigger and more powerful nuclear bombs, and who could build more. This leads to the idea of MAD, which is mutually assured destruction. Neither country is going to... The idea for MAD is neither country will use nuclear weapons here, because if they do, it will lead to the end of the world, and it will destroy the world as we know it. Let's talk about some foreign policy for Harry Truman and the foreign policy of the Cold War. After Yalta, and after Harry Truman saw how Russia was taking over Eastern European countries and forcing them to become communist, he saw Russia as a threat. So he's going to pass the Truman Doctrine, which Congress will authorize. The idea of the Truman Doctrine is it will be the policy of the United States to support people who are resisting subjugation by armed minorities or outside pressure. So what this means is America will give monetary and weapons to any country resisting communist revolutions. America does this first in Greece and Turkey. Britain's no longer able to help these countries, and America's going to give them weapons and money to help them stop the communist rebellions that are going on there. Another big plan of Harry Truman is the Marshall Plan. This was to help rebuild the economy of Europe and Asia. The idea was that people will be less attracted to communism. It'll look less sexy if their economy is stable. The Western nations will accept the Marshall Plan. Stalin will not allow the Eastern nations to accept the Marshall Plan. Truman did offer it to the Eastern European nations, but they will not be allowed to accept it. This shows the economic development of the Marshall Plan. It's cute. During this time, there will be starting to be a struggle for dominance between America and the Soviet Union. The Iron Curtain is a metaphor that Winston Churchill came up with, how he said the world was being divided between communist and non-communist nations. After World War II, and in some of the conferences in World War II, they decided to, the European countries, America and Russia and Britain, decided to divide Germany up into two countries, in East and West. Eastern Germany will be divided and occupied by the Soviet Union. It will become Eastern Germany. Western Germany was originally occupied by America, France, and Britain, but it will become one country, Western Germany. So Germany is going to be divided between a communist side and a non-communist side. That being said, if you look right here, Berlin was the capital of Germany, so both sides wanted it. So Berlin, even though it's in the eastern side, was also divided into two. So Western Berlin was part of the non-communist side, and Eastern Berlin was part of the communist side. What happened, though, is Western Berlin, which was non-communist, had a much better standard of living. So a lot of people were trying to flee there. That way they can get to the non-communist part of Germany, if you were in Eastern Germany. Stalin wants all of Berlin for himself. So in 1948, he's not going to allow any Americans to use the roads in Eastern Berlin in Germany. That way he thought he could starve Western Berlin off, and Western Berlin would have to just join the communist side. What Harry Truman's going to do is he's going to do the Berlin Airlift, where he uses bombers to send supplies to Western Berlin. He knew Stalin wouldn't be willing to shoot down American airplanes. America's going to send thousands of bombers to provide food and supplies for Western Berlin. Eventually, Stalin will back down and allow the United States to use the road again. 1949, Berlin is split into two countries. East will become communist, West democratic. It's not going to be till 1990 they reunite. Because a lot of the people in East Berlin were trying to flee to West Berlin in the 1960s, you're going to see a wall built up, the Berlin Wall, which we will talk about later on. Berlin Airlift. It's so cute. Berlin Airlift again. One of the big things that happened during the Cold War is we're going to have a second Red Scare in American history. We had the first one after World War I with like the Palmer Raid, Sacco and Vanzetti. There's going to be a greater fear of domestic communist influence and spies in America. Some of this was true because there were Russian spies in America. But the United States also goes overboard. What's going to happen is there will be some laws passed, which we're going to talk about a little bit about the Red Scare and congressional laws that were passed during the Cold War. So let's start off with the congressional laws. The NSA was the National Security Act. What this did was this merged the Army and Navy departments to create the Department of Defense. It was meant to streamline. It also created the National Security Agency and the CIA. We talked about how NATO was formed. Russia created the Warsaw Pact. The whole idea of containment theory, it was created by an American diplomat, George F. Kennan. And what George F. Kennan said was that basically he said that the Russians only understand and recognize and respect strength. We can't allow the Russians to freely just take over Eastern European countries. We can't take over these, we can't force these Eastern European countries to become democratic again, because that would cause a world war. But we need to stop the spread of communism from going to more places. So his idea was containing communism from where it already is. He came up with this idea in the Long Telegram, and George F. Kennan is a person you should definitely know. He's pretty legit. Here's his quote. The main element of any United States policy towards the Soviet Union must be long-term, patient, but firm and vigilant containment of Russian expansive tendencies. There is going to be a big fear of external and internal communism, as I mentioned before. Joseph McCarthy is going to be a senator from Wisconsin, not very well known, but he's going to claim to have a list of over 200 people in the State Department that were card-carrying members of the Communist Party. So he was a Republican, and he was basically saying that Harry Truman's administration was full of communist spies. He's going to then change his number to 80. McCarthy is going to use the fear of communism to get popularity. He's going to use fear tactics and lies to some extent to gain popularity and shut people up. Some of the people he did accuse were actually communist. He got some of his lists from J. Edgar Hoover. But really, he just was doing this for the popularity and to gain power. McCarthyism is a synonym for unfounded accusations. HUAC was the House of Un-American Activities, which had existed even before the Red Scare. One of the members of there was Richard Nixon. He was a congressman from California. HUAC is going to start questioning people. It's a congressional legislative committee. And they're going to start questioning people who might be communist spies. One of the big people that Richard Nixon accuses was Alger Hiss. Alger Hiss was a member of the State Department. He went to Yalta. He was a disciple under FDR, very well known in liberal circles. He's going to be accused by one of his former acquaintances, Whittaker Chamber, of being a communist spy. At first, the media and everybody kind of contradicts this and says there's no way Alger Hiss is a communist. This is a witch hunt. This is ridiculous. Nixon's going to defend Whittaker Chambers. Eventually, Whittaker Chambers gives them information that proves that Hiss was a communist. And we know from the release of Russian files in the 1990s that Hiss was definitely a communist. So Nixon was right here. That and he was given state secrets, so he was also a traitor. What Whittaker Chambers did was Whittaker Chambers brought people to his house. In his house, he had a hollowed out pumpkin. In the pumpkin were little like microfiles that they used to have when you're taking pictures of documents. We don't really have those anymore. And these were files, and some of them were written in Hiss's name. So like it's obviously that Hiss was the one that gave Chambers the stuff. So it proved that at the very least that Hiss was giving out governmental secrets. Hiss will be convicted and arrested for perjury. And a lot of liberals all the way to the 1990s were still defending Hiss. And it was kind of embarrassing for them when we found out he was a communist spy all along. Let's talk about some of the other acts. The McCarran Act was passed that said that all communist groups needed to sign up with the federal government. We do have freedom of association in America, so a lot of people thought this violated the First Amendment. The idea here is that communists were trying to overthrow the government, so it doesn't apply to them. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were two Americans that were accused of giving nuclear secrets to the Russians. If you remember, the Russians got the nuclear bombs super quickly, and these two people were accused of giving nuclear secrets to the Russians. They will be executed under Eisenhower. A lot of people thought it was a witch hunt, that this was unfair, that they were innocent. There was international fervor for Eisenhower to pardon them, but he let them be executed. We found out in the 1990s they were actually spies. They had given radar, sonar, jet propulsion, and nuclear weapon secrets to the Russians. So they committed treason. The Loyalty Review Board was created by an executive order. This made all government officials sign an oath of loyalty. Under Truman, he did this to try to avoid the worst excesses of the Second Red Scare. The Smith Act was actually passed in 1940, but it was used during the Cold War. It made it a crime to advocate trying to overthrow the government. Lastly, we're going to talk about the Hollywood 10. The Hollywood 10 were 10 motion producers, directors, and screenwriters who are going to appear before HUAC. They're going to refuse to answer whether they had ever been members of the Communist Party. Because of this, they'll be held in contempt of Congress, and they're going to be blacklisted from basically performing or in Hollywood ever. We have found out some of them were communist, but not like communist spies. They just were political communists. They were just naive. But like what we did to them, it was bad. Like people should not be persecuted for their political beliefs. There's a difference between treason and this. But these people did lose, a lot of them lose their careers. Here's Alger Hiss. Smug. Here's the Hollywood 10. Lastly, we're going to talk about the Korean War. After World War II, Korea was occupied. The North Koreans it's going to be made into two countries. North Korea will be communist. It's going to be led by Kim Il-sung, father of Kim Jong II. The South will be non-communist. It's not really democratic. It's led by Ray. He was kind of a dictator, but he was non-communist. Korea is going to be divided at the 38th parallel. China, which became a communist country in 1949, was a big supporter of communist North Korea. China wanted all of Korea to be communist, and China is going to give weapons and supplies to North Korea. They tell North Korea that if they invade, they'll support them. Russia kind of goes along. They didn't realize it would get that far. So North Korea, communist North Korea, is going to invade South Korea. After this, the United Nations will send in soldiers. Russia wasn't at the meeting. And the United Nations will send in 50,000 soldiers. They'll send in more than 50,000 soldiers. America is going to push which will be led by America. The United Nations force will push back the North Koreans all the way to the border of China. After this, North Korea got all the way to South Korea. It looked like they were going to conquer all of them. The United Nations came in. They pushed them all the way back here. China was worried that this was going to lead to them being invaded. So China's going to send in their soldiers, and they're going to push them back. So China will directly get involved. and there'll be kind of like a stoppage right here. And eventually this is where the peace treaty will signed. We're going to still have two Koreas, and nothing really changes, except the Cold War gets much hotter. It's called the Cold War because America and Russia never directly fight. 50,000 American soldiers will die in this war. General MacArthur, after China sent in their soldiers, wanted to drop tactical nuclear bombs on China. Truman realized, this guy's crazy. This would lead to World War II, World War III, and a nuclear annihilation. MacArthur's going to criticize Truman in the press. So MacArthur will be fired by Truman for not respecting the chain of command. More people liked MacArthur than Truman, so Truman's going to lose a lot of popularity. He's going to be very unpopular as he leaves the presidency, which is ironic because he's considered one of the best presidents now. One of the last things that was passed in the end of Truman's presidency was NSC 68. This is going to increase the military defense budget by 400%. We have the Truman Doctrine, we have the Marshall Plan, we have all these new things, so we need to spend a lot more money now, guys, on defense. All right, kiddos, and that's all I have for you for today. Until next time, deuces, deuces, yeah.